Hi, smart moms and dads. Welcome to another episode of the Brainy Moms podcast, brought to you today by Learning RX Brain Training Centers. I'm your host, Dr. Amy Moore, and I am joined by Dr. Jody Jedlicka as my co-host today. Hi, Jody.
Hi.
And Dr. Jody and I are going to interview Amy Betters-Midtvedt. Amy is a Today Parenting contributing author with more than 1 million readers and 25 years of experience working with adolescents and families in both her job as a literacy coach and in her personal life, raising 5 kids with her husband, Todd. So her work has appeared in many publications like Huffington Post, Parents Magazine, Your Teen Magazine, as well as in So God Made a Mother by Leslie Means. Amy has a master's degree in leadership, curriculum, and instruction, and is the author of the book, You'll Make It and They Will Too. Everything no one talks about when you're parenting teens. All right, I'm excited for this conversation. Let's welcome Amy.
How are you guys?
Good. How are you?
Really good. I'm sorry I'm in this room with the sun in my back.
I think that one of the secrets to surviving motherhood is flexibility.
Absolutely.
Surviving motherhood, surviving life, surviving everything.
Like humanity, just being a human person on the planet. Yep.
Yeah. But, I used to be a teacher educator. And so I would teach these future teachers that flexibility is the key to sanity.
Absolutely. So true. I'm working with so many just brand new baby teachers right now, you guys. And that's it, right? Where I'm just like, it's okay. It's just not it's so rare this is going to go how you planned.
Yeah.
Right? It's so rare.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So I was
reading for life, right?
Yes. Amen.
Say that again, Dr. Jody. I didn't hear you.
I said another metaphor life. This is very rarely going to go the way you thought it was.
Yeah, totally.
Learn to accept.
All right. So I'm reading your book in the dark this morning over coffee. I'm a speed reader. Anyway, I am a brand new empty nester. As of Monday, I'm a brand new empty nester.
Yes. Oh, I'm just doing this to you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Listeners, Amy's hugging me. Okay. Yes. So I cried. I'm reading your book and I'm just reflecting on, yes, I have 3 boys. Yes. Reflecting on, yes, we did this and we went through that. And, this was a challenge that we had too. And at the same time, kind of mourning the loss of those challenges and years and working through that and the connections, and then knowing that every room is empty right now. And so I'm going to cry. I feel so raw in that loss that my youngest, we launched my youngest on Monday. And so I'm going to try and make it through this with humor, but I may shed a couple tears.
You are allowed to shed the tears. That is really hard. That's a big landmark that I feel is out there for me right now. And my youngest is just turning 14 on Tuesday. And I know the speed at that this is going to go at. And so that anticipation of that moment, I feel like I can just relate. I just feel like I'm one step behind you and I can see what you're feeling. And I know it's exactly what's coming. And yeah, it's
tough. I'm coming at this from a totally different perspective. I have 3 adult children.
We need you probably right now.
I don't know that I'm going to be a whole lot of help, but I remember planning to be a puddle and, planning for that to be traumatic and feeling so excited when I was driving away, but excited for my child. This is so exciting what they're going to be doing. And the other thing is, once my kids all went to college, I think they spent more time at home with us than they ever had in high school. And so I just felt like they immediately had a new appreciation for what they were leaving behind and tried to come back often. So, I don't know if that helps or hurts, but
yeah. Go ahead, Amy.
I feel like that is, I actually ended up, because I was close to the empty, we have 5 and we had launched 2, 3 was going to go, 3 decided to do a gap year. 1 and 2 came back to commute this year. So the weird thing is, like, I was the same way. Like, I'm pushing toward this empty, and now everybody's here, all 5 of them, inexplicably
Mhm.
for a year. But the math is that they'll probably all leave almost simultaneously, right? Within a couple of years. So but it is good to have that perspective, because I forget that when I think about even Sam leaving, I forget, oh, that's right. Ellie is actually laying on the couch in the other room, and I'm going to take her to the doctor this afternoon because she lives here and she's sick, and I still get to take care of her. And it's not what I thought. So that coming back you're right. It's true. We don't realize that. And sometimes I still don't appreciate it because I'm in anticipatory grief. So,
Yeah, and I think, my husband said, yes, this is sad, and you can, sit in that space. He said, but think about the opportunities that all 3 of them have. All 3 of them have met their forever person. They're with their forever person. And so really, this is the next chapter in their life, in our life. Like, I'm gonna have 3 daughters now, right? Like, so I don't know. But it's sad at the same time. So
mhm. It's just
anyway,
like the very definition of bittersweet. It
yeah,
really is.
yeah, for
It's
sure.
kind of like, though, that you just don't understand or you just don't recognize or know yet how things are going to be changing for the better, because we just moved into a whole different place of relationship with our kids when they all
Yeah.
left. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
now I'm a grandma, and one of the things that really struck me when I was reading your book, Amy, was how you talk about how when kids are young, so our grandkids are between 5 and 9 years old. They're
Okay.
9, 8, 7, 6, and 5. So
That's
between
crazy.
5 and 9 years old, and they're all in this stage of can't stop telling you everything. Like, they're just chatterboxes, and it's
So
just
much.
so delightful. But I think what makes it delightful as a grandparent is that it's going to change, and
Yes.
it's going to change quickly. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is, like, how can I prepare for that? Or how can I set the stage so that I've got enough, like, relational equity? I learned that word from you, Dr. Amy. Relational
Oh,
equity
yeah.
built up, that when they get to be teenagers or preteens and they're starting to separate from that stage of telling you everything, like, is there something I can do to keep that relationship going in
Mhm.
at least as close to it as I can? I just will miss that.
I really think you're doing it. You're listening, right? You're an enthusiastic participant in their lives. You want to know about them. Like, I look at it, if I look at it through like both a parent and a grandparent lens, I look at the grandparents my kids have, that they've remained very close with. And in particular, they all have different relationship with different grandparents, but in particular, one of my daughters and my mom have a very strong relationship. Somehow my dad has pulled off that every kid has told me on the side, I'm Papa's favorite. Don't tell anybody, but I'm Papa's favorite. So he's like worked some sort of magic there. We don't know what he was planting in their minds, but it's worked for him. So you'll have to ask him about that one. But I do think like those little rituals too that you do, like my mom has taken every kid shopping for their birthday and for back to school since they were little, and picked out a back to school gift, and that's how they got their birthday. And like she's actually layered it onto Christmas as they got big. And it's just that tradition. They talk with her. They want, they've got these rituals and routines that from little on they start to value so much the older they get. Around 14, maybe you're kind of like, oh, remember, this is what you're doing. And they might even have that feeling of like, but I was going to go with my friends, or I was going to do this other thing, that they come back around. Just like our kids, right? But I do think for grandparents, you are so lucky because you're leveraging all these fun things. So
Mhm.
it's like pure fun, right? Like we're going back to school shopping with mom. It's like there's some fraught things that are happening there, right? There's more layers that we're peeling through to shop, and you're shopping with Momir and you're just like so excited, and Momir's gonna you're gonna get whatever you want. It's gonna be great. We're gonna get pretzels, and we're gonna also go to lunch, and oh, look at, she also got me that. You know what I mean? It's all those things, and those talks that come along the way. So I think you're doing it. It is just, I love that relational equity, and I think that in that ritual, all those little things matter so much to them. My kids value like just the weird things, the cups they use at their grandparents that they still want to be there. All those little pieces are just so important and nostalgic to them as they get older.
Mhm.
All right. Well, let's talk about your book. Well, first of all, let me just ask you. So, you've worked with a ton of kids, both in your career and you've raised 5. And so Like, why the focus on teens? What made you want to do that?
Well, the original book I was writing was not at all about teens. That one's still going to come because I set it aside. But it really was just a multitude of things. What I found was, first of all, I have a group of friends, writer friends, who really have helped me in my writing journey, and they kept asking me questions about teens. They're just a little bit behind me in the parenting journey. And they're like, there's nothing out there, Amy. Like, okay, wait, just stop talking about this, but can we talk about this? We need to talk about this. And we found we're in these conversations. They're like, this is your book. And as I looked around, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is exactly where I'm positioned in my life. Like, not only are my kids these ages, as a literacy coach, as an educator, I started out in fourth grade back in the day, right? I was holding hands with little Sydney on the playground at recess. Such good memories having your kids. And like, I had kind of brought this journey as an educator. I had gone through to fifth grade, sixth grade. I had found myself in seventh, eighth, and now ninth and 10th grades. And I just realized I love these kids. I just have this heart for this teenage, awkward, crazy, walking down the hallway, doing all the weird things. And then, but yet also trying to get in to the story that you're reading, but also look cool at the same time. And just all the layers of things this kid has going on. And then to have them in my house too, and to see that flip side of what we see in educators, what they're presenting to us in the classroom, and then to be able to see what they're like at home, which is like still also sometimes really little and battling all these different things. And I just really wanted to serve parents who are in this space, especially when I went through my first, and you see this in the book, my first pancake, I call her. She threw me for all the loops, like every loop you could throw a parent for, I swear. She was just like aiming to like do all of them. And as my firstborn, I really, when she was little, it was like, this baby will never do anything wrong as long as she lives. She is perfection put on the planet for the world to enjoy. No pressure on her, right? No question as to why. We might do a little rebelling. But and then discovered she was her own person. And parenting teens brought me just to my knees. I was great with them until they were about in fourth and fifth grade, where that had been my jam. And then I was like, what do I do with these kids? I have no idea. And I so often I just wanted somebody to give me something. Like, I just need a book here where I can turn and say, somebody survived this moment. I just need to hear someone else's kid got a tattoo in the Walmart parking lot and their kid did not die. And the parenting went forward and they're all still talking to each other. I just needed that. And so I wrote it.
Yeah, I love that. A tattoo in the Walmart parking lot, in the back of a van, right?
In the back of a van, just like from a random friend of a friend.
Yeah, and I love how you wrote, and it looked like a monkey did it.
It's so bad. And she is like, she would tell you, I wish you could see it. She's like, yeah, it is terrible. Like, I need to get this fixed someday. Like, you 100% do it. I don't know what you do with this situation.
How did you go from first pancake to knowing something had to change? Like, I call myself a recovering first pancake because I am the oldest of four, and yeah, you do. But how did you come to that like decision realization that like, okay, this is what I thought was going to happen isn't happening. Now what do I do?
Well, let's first explain to listeners what that means, first pancake.
Good
Oh,
point.
so the first pancake is that first, you make your first pancake
And
like
you burn it.
and you burn it, or it's like super doughy. Like one side's super light, so then you turn the heat up and then you flip it and the other side's burnt. And it's just like not correct, right? Your first pancake is kind of like, I put one pancake in, usually on the griddle first, to try to figure out like, how is this going to be right? Is my batter right? Is it too thick? Is it too thin? And then that pancake is just kind of like a little wonky. But the rest of the pancakes benefit from me learning those moments, right? So my firstborn is affectionately called the first pancake. My poor lastborn, they like to tease him about the last pancake that you have after everyone's full and no longer wants pancakes. Poor Sam. I know. No wonder he has a good sense of humor. So that first pancake was that training ground. And I will fully admit, it took me way too long to figure out that I was not doing things correctly, right? I really felt like I knew what I was doing. And a lot of that, I have wonderful parents and their parenting style matched very well with who I was as a human person. So my thinking was, I'll just do those things. And then that will all work. And we will all walk forward, and enjoy. And somewhere along the way, I realized I birthed a person who is absolutely very little like me when it came to a lot of these things. And therefore I had no tricks. I was like, okay, but I'm going to keep doing this. So I'm going to keep grounding you. Like, okay, it didn't work. I'll ground you for longer. Maybe if I ground you for longer still, that'd be great. Oh, I'm going to lecture you. I'm going to lecture you longer. I'm going to take more things away. And all that happened was she would just keep pushing the envelope again, and later told me, like, I knew you were going to ground me. I would just think, okay, she'll probably ground me for 2 or 3 weeks. Is this enough fun to warrant that 3-week grounding? 100% worth being grounded for 3 weeks. And she would go do the thing. Like, young me never would have done that in a million years, right?
That was
like,
totally me, by the way.
okay, so you can appreciate that.
I was
right?
that teenager.
You were that
Yeah,
teenager.
it's worth
You're,
it. I know you're
it's
going
worth
to take
it.
my keys when I get home at 3 a.m., and that's okay.
That's okay, because being out till 3 a.m. is 1,000% worth it.
Yes.
Yes, this personality was a shock to my system. So we really butt heads for so long. And what was the line in the sand for me was, I remember just like giving her the business and being so frustrated and realizing, like, at this point, she was not even like coming home for things. Like, she just wasn't showing up. She was going right to her room. I mean, we were just in such disconnect. And I remember looking at her, and I could just see in her eyes, as I was, telling her all the ways she was living right life wrong, she just was sad. I could see it in her eyes. She was sad and defeated and couldn't wait to get away from me. And I thought, this person is never going to come back to this house when she leaves, because why would she? I get it. I get why I could get her point, right? And I just knew that I remember when she was little, and we used to give these kisses, every time she laughed. It was like Eskimo butterfly, cheek, cheek, every time we laughed. I thought, how do we go from that to this? I don't want this. This is not what I want for my relationship. I want to be the place they want to come back to for their whole lives. And so I knew it was me. It was me. And we say that in education all the time, right? We get frustrated sometimes with what students are doing. It's us. We are the ones who have to make the change so that they can make the change. And so I knew that. And that moment was when I pivoted.
Yeah, you write. Sometimes we need to let go of the rules and focus on the human. We show them that they are still seen and that they matter.
Yes, absolutely. Just exactly as they are. And it's a tricky thing, because you do have to accept they're an absolute separate person with their separate path that's going to go on to have this separate life that you are not going to be able to actually control, by the way, which is a real big bummer. I felt like I had so many good ideas for what she should be doing, right? And so you have to release them and let them know, like, this is great. You're on your own path. And I see you for who you are, not for who I want you to be or who I expected you to be.
Yeah, I love that you wrote something like, you have to remember that our kids are not made in our image, they're made in God's image. I loved that, right? Like, we're not creating little mini me's as much as we would like. I call my youngest my mini me, right? But
Right.
in reality, they don't
Yes,
belong to us.
they do not. And that was a really hard shift, because I spent a lot of time overriding that voice that God has put inside of us to lead us forward with my voice, my very loud voice of what they should do. And it created a lot of doubt in them and a lot of, conflict. And so one of the things I find myself saying a lot now on this other side is, I'm going to offer you this idea that I have based on my experiences in life. And I fully expect you might absolutely brush off 97% of what I'm about to say. But I want you to consider it. But ultimately, I want you to remember there's a voice inside you that's speaking to you. And that's the voice I want you to listen. That's the voice I want you to trust. That's the voice God put inside you. And so, take from us as other humans on your journey that are a step ahead of you and love you like more than anybody on the planet could love you. I'm offering you this in the spirit, and then go forth and trying to recalibrate that to allow them to have a strength of self that they're meant to have.
Mhm. One of the things I love that you did in the book is at the end of every chapter, first of all, you talked about all the hard things, right? All the hard things that every parent has to deal with. But at the end of every chapter, I loved how you put what you can do and what you can't do. Like, for number one, I just think it gives you this feeling like, okay, I need to step back and understand that I have a part of this, like I own a part of this, and what can I do different rather than sitting there waiting for them to change. And if only they would do it this way, if only they'd do it my way, then everything would be fine.
Absolutely.
But stepping back and like thinking about, okay, could I say this different? Could I think something different? Is it really going to matter at the end of the day if he or she doesn't do it the way that I do it? And I just felt like that was really empowering for everybody involved in that situation. So good
Yeah,
job.
I liked that too.
Thank you. It's learning from my mistakes, right? I did want the book to be, because there isn't one, a prescription for parenting. Like, here's what you do, follow my 10 easy steps. If it were that easy, we'd all be out there feeling great all the time about parenting.
So I would like to get into some specifics, right? So we've talked about, oh my gosh, this is hard. It's hard while we're in it. It's hard once they leave. But let's talk about some of the big challenges that we know most parents face when they're raising teens. And so I want to start with phones and social media because, oh my goodness, is this such a controversial topic. And so you actually have a philosophy that's super similar to mine. And so I want to read a quote from you and then just have you speak to it. You say, "We cannot be the world's ultimate snoop, as tempting as that may be. While you can access their texts, social media, photos, and contacts, that doesn't mean you should." Talk
Mhm.
about that.
Amen. Well, I think about, like, the most my mom could hope for was to find like a note in my pocket when she did the laundry to like give her a little bit of scoop or like hear a side of a conversation, right? Otherwise, we had a lot of privacy growing up and a lot of room to make a lot of our own mistakes for better or for worse, right? And if we are accessing every bit of what they do and going over it, first of all, where's their room and their ability to have privacy? Now, privacy also comes with trust, and I talk about that, right? Like, there are times when we might be very concerned, um, but those are the exception, not the rule, right? This, if they're going to have this thing and we're going to give them this thing, then we have to let them learn to use this thing. So that's also why I'm a little more conservative now about when I hand this thing over, when I hand this tool in your hands. It should mean I trust you to use it in a responsible manner, and I don't have to go through. I can't imagine if my mom could have heard every conversation I ever had, both sides, every single photo I ever took, saw every single place I ever was. Where is their autonomy and ability to have freedom in the world? And that's where we're super overprotective in this space. But at the same time, you know, they're also doing all these other things. It just doesn't make any sense. So really, I very rarely check a phone, if ever. Um, the youngest one now might just be like, I can see what sort of websites you're going on. I don't ever go through anybody's texting threads or photos or anything like that. It's just like, kind of, where are you spending your time out there, and making sure that you're in safe spaces as a 14-year-old when you have the entire world in your pocket. And so that part's very shut down. As opposed to, of my older kids, I should have done it the opposite, right? It's like I was really worried about like who you're Snapchatting and who are you with on Instagram, but nah, I'm never looking at the websites you go to, or I'm not looking, noticing that you could spend hours on YouTube and who knows what's out there. So I do think there is that balance, and we do have to be really cautious about when we're putting the entire world in their pocket and then deciding very intently, like, and also I cannot keep that up. There is no way. Who has time to like police? Like, I'm going to give my kid a phone with everything in the whole wide world, and then I'm just going to police it. Are you kidding me? There is no way a human can do that. And they are really smart. They are so smart, you guys. They will hide all the things. They will be one step ahead of us all of the days. So really being aware of that as well is really important. If you think you're reading all their texts, you're not. If you think you're following them on Instagram, they also have their spam account that you don't know the name of, that all their friends are on, and they're logging into a friend's phone. Like, I could tell you, I'm in the middle school and high school, I'll tell you all the tricks. And as soon as I tell you the tricks and you know them, they're going to all change the tricks, because then we know them. Right. So you cannot possibly snoop your way through this part of parenting. It's just not, it's not healthy. It's not right. It's not good. It won't work. All the things.
So, do you have parameters and guidance that you give your child when you hand them the phone? Like what are some specific tips for balancing
Mhm.
freedom and autonomy with internet safety?
Absolutely. So this is the one spot, the only spot my youngest child has more rules than anybody else. So we have really learned, and a lot of this did come from my older kids who were like, listen, you see part of this, we see the rest of it. This is the dumpster fire you're handing to our sibling. Don't do it. So, like, whereas when I handed, and it was a very different world 10 years ago, Instagram was just coming out when my oldest daughter got Instagram, right? And like when Snapchat came out, I had streaks with all of her friends in high school. It was like just this beginning. And then somewhere in the middle, it deteriorated quite a bit. So, our parameters, when you get your phone, you can absolutely have it no social media at all. And right now we're saying until 16. I'm super lucky I'm ending with a easygoing boy. So, some of my other kids admittedly would be pushing back quite a bit more than he is. He's like, it's fine. It doesn't really matter to him. He likes to play singing monsters. So we're cool. And his friends, while some have social media and some do not, they all do have an active texting thread on Messenger. So you're allowed to have a texting thread on Messenger. That's fine. Every single thing that he downloads on his phone goes through me. So I just approve or don't approve. There's timers on things like singing monsters because his frontal lobe will play not that for 72 years and not realize that time has gone by and he's now an old man like Rip Van Winkle. So we make sure that we have timers on that, and he has no access to the internet at all. So no YouTube, no search engines, nothing. So if he wants to search something, he's absolutely welcome to grab the computer. He can sit in the middle of the common space and he can watch YouTube till the cows come home. He can search for anything he wants. That's all done in a common area. And that's just for his own safety. Like I know what and I know what your brain is like right now. You know what your brain is like right now. So this is what we're like, we're doing what's right for your current brain. And as your brain develops and becomes more mature, then your rules will change. And so, and has that been without error? No. There are ways around all of this. And found some. The key to me has just been going in just to see like what's on his phone and what is he using. And that has been plenty for me to catch the few spots where I've had to catch something, and otherwise we've been great. Now, do I know he's also probably left out of things? 1000%. He is definitely left out of things. I am 100% okay with that because 95% of the bad things that happen in middle school right now are happening on Snapchat or are happening on all sorts of different places. So that has really also bolstered my confidence in making the right choice for him. And I do see our culture moving in that direction. I hope that we're starting to understand what we're actually handing to them, and we're starting to make some changes. And at the same time, pushing them out into the world, like okay, instead, go ride your bike, walk to a quick trip, like find a place to go play frisbee golf, do something else that is outside, because our kids aren't used to growing up that way collectively, and we actually have to position them to go do some of those things.
So what I'm hearing you say is you give your kids and your advice is to give kids freedom to be connected socially to their friends.
Mm-hmm.
So through texting, through messenger, through phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
And then the limitations are on access to whatever is out there.
Whatever is out there, absolutely. And too, like as a boy, he games a lot with his little headset and he's got friends he can talk to. He feels very connected socially, I think, through that. And when he does that, that's also in an area where we can hear, we're not eavesdropping. It just happens to be in a common space where it's loud and we have to sometimes say, be quiet, right? But it's also that accountability that other humans are around you to have access to the entire world in a little closed bedroom. It's actually bananas when we think about it, right? So my advice is yes, absolutely. And it's also really difficult once you give it to take it away. So if you're in doubt, just don't do it. Hold out as long as you can on each thing, because once you do it and then you realize it's bad and you have to take it away, it's like when you hand a kid a sucker, one of those giant suckers when they were little, and then you'd realize it was a mess and you're going to have to take it back. It's just the same, just as sticky and horrible.
Yes. So I allowed my two middle schoolers at the time to convince me that Grand Theft Auto was just a racing game.
Mhm.
Like they very carefully chose screenshots of racing to show me
Mhm.
before I would say, yes, you can buy this game, right? And this has been 15 years at this
Right.
point. They were genius about
They're
it,
so smart.
like
They're, s-
genius
they're
about
so
it.
smart.
They even had live action clips to show
Mhm.
me
Mhm.
because I thought I was doing my due diligence,
Mhm.
right? Grand Theft Auto, don't they steal the cars? No, Mom, they just race the cars through Vegas streets and
Yeah,
okay,
100%.
right. So imagine my shock. I don't know, 5, 6 years later, when I realized Grand Theft Auto is rated R plus,
Mhm.
and I had said yes to my middle schoolers
Yes,
buying it.
100%. I said yes recently to an app called DuckDuckGo because it had a cute duck on it. And it came through my, he's got a whatever. It's like you get a little screenshot of like, Sam's requesting blah, blah, blah. It's like DuckDuckGo. And I'm in busy. I'm like, oh, that's cute. There's a duck on it. Sure, you can have it. It's an internet browser that deletes all of your history as you do it. Same, right? It's
Yeah.
like, so we're going to make mistakes. This is not going to be perfection either. None of this is ever. We're doing the best we can, right? You did the best you could in that
With the
moment
knowledge you had at the time.
with the knowledge you had
And
at the
they
time.
carefully curated that knowledge.
Oh, absolutely. And that I'm sure like when that app was requested, it was like in the middle of a school day where I was at work and like definitely busy. It's all right. Of course, I'm just going to be like, yes, sure. That duck is so cute. Duck is not cute. But a duck is dangerous. But
Right.
but we're doing the best we can. So yeah, we can't protect them from everything. We do know that no matter like the key then is that conversation, right? Is later. And I know I had that like with my son, there was stuff when he turned like 18 and 19 where I was like, oh great, thanks for telling me now. But when it happens in that moment, it is that connection to be able to say, all right, we're gonna regroup.
For sure.
You know, one of the things that was always, I think, since the beginning of time, has always been a challenge is navigating your kids' friends and friend issues. And you talk about a lot about that in the book. And when I was thinking, like, could I give an example of this with my kids? I think my kids had different issues with different friends. You know, for some it was, oh, I don't know if they're the best choice of a friend for you. And with others, it's, oh my goodness, do you have friends? Do you have somebody to eat lunch with? And, you know, just how do you communicate and navigate that with your kids?
That's so huge. I feel like we have that same spread kind of here for each kid. And our hearts, like our mom hearts are like you watch them walk in and you just want them to have a friend. Like you want them to have somebody that they can eat lunch with and that they can be close to. And that's been a journey for each of our kids, and throw a pandemic in the middle of it, which I think has really broken a lot of our kids' relationships. And we're still seeing the fallout of that, especially in our schools, that kids are disconnected. So I think friendship is a really huge issue that kids do need actual coaching around. I was just in a classroom this morning and realized these kids, it's January, and asked them how many knew the names of every kid in their class. 5 kids raised their hands. So they're not connecting with each other like they used to. And on top of that, we have kids who, like, in the best of times, weren't necessarily connecting, or were picking all the wrong friends. Social media also, really, we've had that happen where you are meeting people online. And I just want to curse that the internet was ever invented, because you are connecting to these people. I don't know who they are, where they're coming from, if they're real. And when they are real, it's even still bad. So, we have spent a lot of time talking about what makes a good friend. How do you feel? And again, a lot of that comes down to that inner voice. How does this person make you feel when you're with them? Are they bringing you up? Are they bringing you down? We have talked actually recently, like you probably heard this too, like you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So who do you want to be like? Who is like a role model for you, and how can you become friends with that person? And so, early on, I know with one of my daughters, like I encouraged a coffee date with a friend, which was just as like fraught with nerves as a date with a, like a date would have been. Right down to like, what are we going to talk about? How is this going to go? They need some pushes, I think, sometimes to find some of those connections. And then on the flip side, being really open and honest, like when you are, and I think we went through that a lot when you think about getting a tattoo in the back of the van, like, okay, who are you with? Right. And who are you with when this is the road you go down, or when this consequence ends up happening? Like, is that what you want? You want more of this? Or are you looking for a different path? And I'm finding, I think this rings true. I think we find this as women still in our own friendships. We have this idea that our kids are going to have like this friend group and they're going to have it through high school. And then it's going to be this great group they're going to keep getting back together with. Then they're going to be these college friends, like all these things. That's an expectation. And that's not necessarily it's going to shake out. Friendships are difficult. They're allowed to change. You're allowed to have a best friend that's no longer a best friend. I know I had one person stay in a friendship for so long because they felt so guilty. This was my best friend. She keeps saying she's my best friend, but also does not feel like a good relationship. So how do we teach them to move away from those relationships? And that it's okay. Sometimes it's okay to be sitting without friends, that you've got people you talk to in your classes, but none of this feels like a good fit. That's okay. Where else do you have relationships? You have relationships with siblings and grandparents and aunts and uncles and parents and people that you work with and all these other spaces. Those all count as relationships as well. And teaching them just to be healthy in those spaces has been really helpful. And we're still having these conversations with my 23-year-old, right? As friendships grow and change, like, what does this look like for you now? Even as you're starting to think about launching into the world, what friendships are going to stay? What friendships aren't? It's all fine. But it is just learning at the heart of that to navigate relationship and taking some of that pressure off, because they feel so much pressure to have all these friends and to be doing all these things. And I'm not doing all those things, right? Like very few people are. It's okay. It's okay. You're just fine.
Yeah, my mom taught me when I was younger that if you end up with one or two really good friends, then that creates that full social life for you,
Absolutely.
right? And I didn't believe it at the time,
Mhm.
right? Because I think as a teen, you want everyone to like you. And I think,
Yes.
it takes a very long time, well into adulthood, before you
Yes.
realize that not everyone is going to like you, and that's
Yes.
okay.
Right.
Right?
And I tell them that same thing. And then it's like, do you like everyone? Like, are you telling me you honestly like everyone? Well, no. Well, then what are you expecting? Like, you know what I mean? That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. So we actually have interviewed a social scientist from here in Colorado on our show a couple times. Her name's Jessica Spear, and she wrote a book called BFF or NRF. So
Mm.
best friends forever or not really friends. And it's actually a workbook that
Oh,
you can do with your, preteen teen
yeah.
that helps you assess each person in your life as,
Oh,
are they BFF worthy, or
yes.
is this person just going to be an acquaintance and that's okay? And
I
I
love
thought that was
that.
a genius publication. So
That is, I just wrote it down. I feel like I need that.
yeah, so listeners, check out that episode, Jessica Spear, BFF or NRF, if you want to dig a little
So
bit more
cool.
deeply into that idea.
Yes, so cool. I love that.
Yeah. Um, okay. So let's talk about chores and responsibilities. And so I will tell you, um, our kids um, had this name for themselves. They called themselves the child labor force. And they would go, it reminded me of some like Marvel, cartoon, like Wonder Twin powers activate.
I
So
love it.
we would finish dinner and it was time to do the dishes. And my oldest would go, child labor force. And they would jump up and they would get through the dishes as fast as humanly possible.
I love
And when
it.
there were three of them, it was fast, it was quick, it was easy. They kind of made a game of it, but as they, aged out of the child
Yes.
labor force, what should our expectations be? Should one person have to do all the dishes? I don't think so. But what do you
I
think? Speak to all of that.
don't either. Because
Because they're
usually
not
that
our
person,
slaves.
no, and usually that person was me. I know how that feels. right? Like nobody wants to be that person. And so you are exactly correct. And I mean, especially being a teacher, like I really tried to like chart a lot of this, like chore it out, like classroom jobs and all those pieces, which only works as long as I'm going to maintain it, which isn't long typically, right? So you can do all of those little things. But I love that child labor force because to me, that speaks to like this collective, right? And that's really where we've made so many changes. And at one point here, I remember looking around and thinking, I am so in the weeds trying to do all these things and trying to make people help me that I was like, who would ever want to be a mom in this house? Nobody. This looks like the worst job ever because it feels like the worst job ever. And why does the person who like has the kids now I'm supposed to also do all the things? It didn't make any sense. And so really we started to recalibrate on so many levels, right? Every single person here is involved in this community. And you're not just like helping mom when you do the dishes, because that implies everything is my job and then you are my helpers. That is not the case, especially as they get older. And especially now I have, a 23, a 21, a 20, a 17-year-old, and a 14-year-old all living here. And everybody has jobs and responsibilities. And everybody has a reason why they're too tired to do the dishes, right? Myself included. But it isn't about helping. It isn't about helping mom. It isn't about helping dad. It's that we all live here in community. So I'm a big fan of the family meeting with the Post-its and the charts and the whole thing. So we have had family meetings. I think our last one was really effective, where a couple of them were. One where we like sorted out all the jobs in the house and determined who was doing them. And almost all of them were me. And then walking around to see how well they were done. And it was horrible. Like that's where Sam had to be like, no offense, mom, but you are not doing a good job. I'm like, of course I'm not. I am one person. Like, how can one person do all these things? Like, these are not, take the Post-its off. These are not actually my jobs. These are our jobs. So as we live in community together, how are we going to maintain our community space? And so for me, that is really a differentiation here between community space and personal space. I don't really get into their personal space very often. Every once in a while we suggest a 10-minute tidy every day. And then every once in a while we will be like, all right, all laundry, plates, all the things have to clear out of your room. And you got to do a dust and a scrub and just kind of do a reset. That's your own space. The community space we're all responsible for, every single thing. And so really right down to, people saying, well, I didn't eat today, so I'm not going to do the dishes. I didn't eat here. Do you eat here ever? Do you think maybe sometimes I do your dishes when I don't eat? Yeah. Do I sometimes do laundry that's not mine? Yep. And so will you, because that's part of being in the community. So really just trying to encourage that shift. And that is everybody. Sometimes I find myself like sending the boys out to clean the garage and the girls in to clean the kitchen. And they very quickly called me out on that. Like, why would the boys be better at cleaning the garage? That makes no sense because they're boys. What? No. So what are we good at? Where can we use our talents? Who's good at what? And sometimes, it also is not always going to be fair. Two of mine just had this conversation last night. Like they like to divide up the kitchen like as a science. So like I am going to unload the dishes and then I'm also going to wash 3 pots. And then you are going to wash the rest of the pots and put it like, what? Just like get it done. I don't care. Nobody cares. Do you see dad and I ever do that when we're working together? It's just ridiculous. So trying to build that understanding in, it's just about getting it done. And of course, the person who just cooked the meal, should they also be in there now cleaning up the meal? Probably not if there's enough people to do it. So really, that's really served us very well. And I hear them having those conversations with each other now that I'm not running. Like, guys, we're going to clean the kitchen. Mom just got done cooking. Mom, you sit down. Dad, you sit down. Whatever happened. And then we're all going to work together. And I also hear them sometimes letting each other off the hook, which is really cool. Like Kate will be like, I have a huge AP exam tomorrow. Oh, then you can go. Don't worry about helping. So that it's building that understanding of community underneath it all. It's time consuming, and you have to stick to your guns a lot, and you have to also let it be done how it's done, which is really hard. Because sometimes that's not how I do it.
I love how it breaks down traditional gender roles too, right? Like where it says, hey, mom is not responsible for everything in this house. We are all responsible for the things in this house. And so we're teaching really great life lessons so that when they do leave and find their spouses and have their own homes, they are not having an expectation that the woman is responsible for it all.
Amen.
One of the things my mom did really, really well, both my parents did really, really well, is like when we'd have big things like, okay, it's spring, the lawn needs to be raked, and let's get out there and do that. And they would have all of us do it. But my mom was particularly good at pointing out not necessarily that the task was fun, but wasn't it fun doing this together? Like,
Yes.
and so now my sisters and I all have this mindset of, well, raking the lawn stinks, but we're going to have a blast doing it. And,
Yes.
there was always good food and all of that kind of stuff that went with it. And I just always thought she was pretty clever to point out, the silver lining in that all the time.
That's so huge. Absolutely. I feel the same. Like we always do like good music, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like while they're doing something, they'll dance around. That's where I have to just be like, okay, settle in, Amy. They're gonna clean the kitchen for an hour and a half. Right? Like I could be done so fast, but they're making it fun for themselves, right? And so it's going to take 1,000 years, but I appreciate that, right? Like, okay, good. That helps me reframe that. I'm going to reframe that as they're having fun, having a good time.
Yeah.
I love that. All right, we need to take a quick break. Let Dr. Jody read a word from our sponsor. And when we come back, I want to talk about this idea of having different rules for different kids and how that's not unfair when we come back.
All right, Emmy was a ball of nerves about math. It made her so frustrated that she would avoid it at all costs. Then her families found Learning RX. The Learning RX team created a brain training program tailored to Emmy's unique needs and goals. Her dad loved the one on one help, and her mom was thrilled at how adding deliberate distractions actually helped improve Emmy's focus. After completing her Learning RX training, Emmy's confidence soared. In fact, she says she feels smart in math and science now and wants to be an astronaut when she grows up. Go, Emmy. While your child may or may not achieve these same results, Learning RX would love to work with you to get answers about your child's struggles and learning. Get started at learningrx.com or head to our show notes for links to more helpful resources.
I love how Dr. Jody puts
Adlib.
commentary into
I
the
love
ad.
it. So I felt like go Emmy too.
Yeah,
I know,
exactly.
right?
Again, we were just
Oh,
talking about, not like traditional gender roles
yeah,
and breaking
yeah.
those. Yeah, so for sure.
So
Okay.
perfect.
So I let's see. So one of my kids' middle school teachers had this sign on her wall that said, fair doesn't mean everyone gets the same thing. Fair means everyone gets what they need. And so I was reminded of that when you wrote, having different rules for each kid doesn't mean it's unfair. I told my students the broken leg story every year. If one student were to break their leg, every student wouldn't get a cast on their own leg. Instead, one might have a cast, another with a paper cut might need a band aid, and another who didn't need a thing at the moment. Each person would get their needs met, but they should prepare to look different. There simply isn't a rule that works the same for every single kid. We need to look at each kid and each situation and move forward from there. Each of these people is a different human and we parent accordingly. I love that. Talk a little bit more
Thank you.
about that philosophy.
Oh, yes. This is just so true. And that's why I hesitate. People will say things like, what is your curfew for your junior? I don't know. Tell me about your junior, right? Like that's what we need to be thinking about because for every single one of my kids, their curfew of their junior year was probably different. Um, so it is about who is that human? What are their needs? And how are they functioning right now in the family? There have been times where an older person in the family has a curfew earlier than a younger person in the family. That's just the way it goes. So as we're looking at things like the rules surrounding, it is very much a negotiation with each person. We talk about something called the bank of trust here as well. And that the more you are doing what you say you are going to do when you are, walking your talk, you get a lot of deposits in the bank of trust. And the moment you're not doing that, you can get little withdrawals. And sometimes you get a really big withdrawal here and there where the bank becomes quite empty. And so rules also fluctuate for each person. It isn't that your curfew is always going to be 11. Now you didn't come home till 3 in the morning. That was a lot of worry and stress on the family. We're gonna come home at 9 o'clock until you're home at 9 o'clock a lot. And then we can say, okay, the bank of trust is filled back up. So each person kind of has that knowledge that they also impact the structure around them. It's not just me saying, here's your rule. It is like, here's kind of what we agree on. And we negotiate some of that, right? Like sometimes I think it's going to be 11, but they make a pretty decent case for 12. All right, that's fine. As long as we're all kind of living truly in the household. Then they also help them understand it's their decision that caused the impact to their situation. They have control and they have say in that. And that looks so different for each person because really, like I think about that first pancake. Now that second pancake, it was like, go ahead, please stay out. Stay out later and have some fun. Why are you always home at 9? Right? It really was that idea of wanting her to kind of explore and go out in the world a little bit more and almost needed that little bit of a push to be more social and then of course being okay with that when maybe it wasn't. Also knowing that, we could really go at it. My first pancake and I just found this like conversation back and forth like this. My second born, if I were to do this, I'm yelling. Like this is a yelling face. I could be talking like this and I'm yelling, right? So just knowing that approaching that person is very different. Our relationship is very tender. She will say to me, like, can you just change your face when you say that, Mom? Can we have a quieter conversation about this? Can we talk about this when you're more calm? She'll even say, right? Because she'll know that I'm like kind of jazzed up, but it's very different person. And then the third, my first boy, then I was like, oh goodness, now they don't talk at all. This particular one does not. And that door is always closed. And what is happening there? And how can I really move forward?
I love this. And I parented the same way. I don't know if you did, Jody, but I trusted my kids until they gave me a reason not to.
Yes, and that was the language we used. And I love her language about having this bank of trust. And so, really, you're treating every child the same. If you're treating them with this bank of trust, it's just what they do with it is different. And so, it's kind of both things, both ways of looking at fair. I saw that same fair comment that you talked about, where fair is not everybody gets
With
the
this,
same thing. When I was literally driving my last child home from dropping her off at college. I was
Where,
like, oh,
where'd you
why?
see it?
I was watching a podcast or something on YouTube, like I was watching something, trying to learn something,
Yeah.
and the speaker said that, and I thought, here I am driving home from dropping my last child at college. Why did nobody tell me this ever before? But
And we know that is something that flies out of every child's mouth. That's not fair, right? And so
1,000%.
I think it's really a great opportunity for us to share why
Yeah.
a child gets something different, right? That
Yes.
it's not about fairness, it's about
No.
need. And so that child needs something that
Mhm.
you don't need.
Right. The more clear we can be about that from little on, the better it is. I very rarely hear the words, it's not fair here, other than around the dishes. That's the only place that there's like a large sense of justice in my house. Other than that, there is a pretty good understanding that and I think it comes from this. They know when they need something, their needs will be met.
Mhm,
They will be listened to. We will trust them.
mhm.
When they say, like, for example, when you say you need a mental health day, I'm going to trust that that's what you need. And we're going to give it to you and that you're not going to abuse that ask. Right. And so when you see someone else staying home for a mental health day, it's not that you need one too and they get to stay home and I've got to go. No, today, this is what they need. Just like when they have strep throat and they're home, we don't all stay. And so over time, I really think there is that sense. And I do think the other part that's really cool about that is they start to see each other's needs as well and understand that in community, we all are going to have different needs throughout life. That's a really awesome life lesson that we can plant in them just by recognizing and connecting with them as their own individual human.
Well, and it's really difficult for someone without a fully formed prefrontal cortex to have fully developed empathy. And so when we can immerse them in those situations that help build empathy, I think that's a gift.
It really is. Just those little bits. Like it might be not that like that Sam is feeling empathy for Kate in that moment, but he has understanding
Yes.
in his
You've
mind of why
planted a
it's like
seed.
this. I can understand this. And I know that this rule is also true for me. Because really the one rule is that we'll try to give you what you need to the best of our ability when you need it. That's what we're going to try to do. Whatever that is in whatever time. And sometimes to the best of our ability isn't going to be exactly what you want, but it's going to be as close as we can get.
Yeah. We are at an hour. And
Oh my
so
gosh.
we need to, I know, right? It's hard to
That zipped,
believe.
that zipped past.
I know. It went super fast. Amy, how can listeners find you?
Well, I am all the places. I am on Facebook, Instagram, a little bit on TikTok, thanks to my kids, which is kind of crazy. But the best place to probably go, because sometimes socials are crazy, is my website. That leads you to everything. It's amybettersmidtvedt.com. There's links there to all my socials. There's a place to sign up for my newsletter. There's a link to every place that sells the book, which is all the places, and a little shop there too, of little goody things that my husband sometimes makes and puts in there. So all the things, amybettersmidtvedt.com.
Can you spell that?
Yes. Okay. So it's my last name is just better with an S, Betters. You're good. Now the next part is Midvet, Midtvedt. I find if you just start putting in the front of that, I pop up.
Yeah.
And you should be able to find me. Or if you can always find me through the book. If you search the book, you'll make it and they will too. Once you find the book, Google does a nice job of displaying like my picture and a little link to my website because apparently AI works for us sometimes.
We're actually going to put all of your links in the
Thank
show
you.
notes so that listeners can find more about you, a link to get your book. Amy, thank you so much for being with us today. This was such a fun
Oh
conversation.
my gosh. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for
these
having
are
me. I feel
great.
like I could have chatted all day with you guys.
Yeah. All right, moms. Thanks for listening today. If you like us, please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at the Brainy Moms if you haven't done it already. If you like seeing our faces, you can find us at the Brainy Moms on YouTube. And if you love us, we would love it if you would give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts so that we can reach out to more moms just like you. Okay, that is all the smart stuff we have for you today. We hope that you feel a little bit smarter. We're going to catch you next time.